Hi viewers, today we have got Jeri Ellsworth, the founder of Tilt 5, the game that has been changing the way in which gamers can come together and play. With one key point in her mind, she wanted the gamers to come together because she being a gamer, she wanted a platform wherein she can bring together gamers. But having said that, she has been a high school dropout, started off making a lot of radios in her childhood, moved to making computers, selling computers, and then assembling computers, and one of the go-to person in terms of Commodore 64 and making computers into gaming stations. And from there, she moved to Valve Games. She was the one behind HTC Vive, bringing that to life. And from there to Castaya, another startup which she thought of winding up because of her own challenges and thought process. And then she moved to Tilt 5, the augmented reality based gaming. I think they will be moving to other solutions as well in AI soon. And currently, she is in news. Tilt 5 has received $7.5 million funding from various investors. So today we have got Jeri Ellsworth to talk about the uh, her life, the story, and about her new startup baby, the Tilt 5. Welcome, Jeri.
Hey, thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Great. So, Jerry, for the viewers, definitely we'll talk about Tilt 5. Uh, when I look back and look at your journey, you are a high school dropout, and now you are a uh, multi-startup founder, if I would say that. There are a lot of high school dropouts who are now creating
Hmm.
startups, successful startups. So, how does that feel when you look back at the journey that you have so far?
You know, it's kind of amazing for me. I grew up in a very, very small town. There wasn't a lot of opportunities for people in that town. And in high school, I got involved with auto racing. And I started making quite a bit of money being a professional race car driver. And that's why I ended up dropping out of high school. It's just like, why hang out in high school when I'm making so
Enough
much
money.
money? Yeah. And from there, I'd always had interest in electronics and computers, so I just continued, on the side, learning more and more about how to design electronics, work with computers, and it eventually turned into my second career, which was owning a chain of retail computer stores in 1995, and I did that for 5 or 6 years. I was quite successful with that because it was a very good time to own custom-built computer, a custom-built computer business. And in 2000, the computer store market had declined so much. I decided that I would just move to Silicon Valley and just force my way into various startup companies. And so I took this kind of hobby skills that I had been doing for fun, building radios, computers, electronics, and I found my way into these various startups where I started building various projects for startups and doing designs for them. And I quickly got this reputation of like the person you would go to if you need to put a team together really quickly, get a project done in a short amount of time. And I just repeated that formula over and over and over again for years and years, and got to work on a lot of really interesting projects. So things from like toys that shipped in the millions. I worked on high-end video compression integrated circuits, things that ended up in there's a video recorder we had here in the United States called the TiVo.
Hmm.
Did some chips that were inside that. I did navigation systems for low
Wow.
Earth orbit rockets.
Wow.
Just all kinds of really exciting projects over the years. And I guess back to your question of like, how does it feel, you know, dropping out of high school and then ending up here where I'm running a company that's raised, quite a bit of funding. It's very surreal because as I was dropping out and getting into race cars, family members and friends were very worried for me. They were encouraging me not to do it. And then when I stopped my racing career and started my computer store business, which took a little bit to get going, same friends and families were worried for me that I would fail. And I was kind of struggling in the beginning. And the same thing happened yet again when I came to Silicon Valley and tried to force my way into doing engineering without doing the traditional high
Schooling.
school, college, you type path. Sorry, that was a long-winded story, but
Oh,
it's
no worries. Yeah. So you said that people always thought that you're gonna fail. So did that give you that additional motivation or additional zeal to keep going and keep pushing yourself?
I think so. It hurt when people were worried about me, but then I recognized that it wasn't that they were being mean to me. It was that they were just worried about my well-being. But my father had um, kind of taught me to be self-reliant and be very confident. So I think it's his fault that I've had this like confidence, and it's helped me. It's like even though I'm terrified, you know, I mean maybe that's something that people don't talk about a lot, but for me at least, every time I'd made one of these transitions in my career, did something completely different. Like getting into race cars was scary, really scary for me. Opening a computer store and putting every penny I had into inventory and renting a place was really scary. And I was just, weeks away from completely running out of money. Same thing in electronics. Coming to Silicon Valley, I was just living off of the small amount of savings I had left. And if it didn't work, what do I go do after that?
Yeah, so it's great to listen to someone, a startup founder now. Definitely, you're a startup founder, to talk about the scary and the terrifying things that you might have faced in the past. Because normally, once people achieve success, uh, they just tend to put up the rosy picture, and uh, which motivates a lot of young people or a lot of people to just jump into the startup bandwagon. But having said that, there are a lot of challenges that go around startups. So definitely, you have a great story around those startup and startup investment, which I'll come into. So before that, since you spoke about your dad who pushed you and who motivated you and helped you to make be self-reliant, I want to talk about the dirt car racing circuit that you used to do, the way in which you used to build your own cars and go out there and give a tough fight to the boys out in the town.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was a thrilling point in my life. I did race cars for about 5 years. I got into it in high school because my father had done a little bit of racing when I was a kid. There's these little tiny racetracks that are all throughout Oregon, which is the state that I lived in. And he did a couple little races where you would just take kind of a street car, modify it, and race it. And I thought that was really neat. And um, we lived close enough to a track. As soon as I got old enough to own my own streetcar, I would drive to the racetrack and watch. And I would sit in the grandstands and watch these races where you'd have like 20 high-speed cars with big V8 motors going around, sliding, bumping into each other. And I was like, wow, that is just so exciting. I want to do it. And something snapped in my brain. It's like, I'm going to do that. So I went back to my father, one day, and I'm like, Dad, build me a race car. And he was dead set against me getting into racing, too dangerous, all the normal things that you would think about.
yes.
And so I kept pestering my father saying like, build me a race car. I want to get into racing. And he's like, no, 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 you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Um, and finally I got him convinced. Well, this is what he said. He's like, if you want to race, there's only two ways it's going to happen. I'm not building the car for you. You're going to have to either find enough money to buy a car or build your own car, because that's your only two options. And so, I was working minimum wage, so I didn't have any money to go purchase a race car outright. They're very expensive. So I started teaching myself and working with mentors in town, like with local machine shops, like how to weld, how to fabricate metal. And I built my own race car from the ground up. So the first race car I built from books and talking to people was built out of tubular steel, had a V8 motor that I built myself. I built the body on it. Partway through that process, my father saw that I was very serious and started helping me, partly probably to keep me safe. And so it was a great project. We worked together. He was supportive beyond that point.
And you almost won a couple of races in the town.
Oh, I won a lot. Yeah, I became very competitive. So the very first year that I raced, though, I thought that I was going to be so good. Like everyone thinks they're going to be the world's best. And maybe that's part of my startup kind of DNA. Like I went in with this confidence, like I'm going to win every race. I'm going to be number one. And of course, the reality was out of, 100 cars that were in this racing circuit, I came in, I can't remember, it was like 70th or something. And what I thought was always funny out of like coming in like 70th out of that is that there were people that raced fewer races than I did that actually placed higher.
Wow. Okay.
They had like destroyed their car or quit racing and they still beat me. But I was like motivated. I really wanted to get good. And so I started talking to more mentors and learning more about how to set race cars up and adjust them. There's a lot of adjustments in them. There's this gentleman out of Florida who I kept calling on the telephone. He had written a book about race cars. And after my first year, I was calling him so much. He's like, please stop calling me. If you can just come to Florida for 1 or 2 weeks, I'll let you stay with my wife and myself, and I'll teach you everything you need to know about race cars. And so that's what I did. I got on a bus and drove on a bus for 4 days to Florida.
Wow. Okay.
Spent a couple weeks with this gentleman, Duke Southard, and learned not only how to set up a race car, but he spent a lot of time telling me about the psychology of winning and winning at racing, which has been really helpful. Like the psychology of winning at racing also applies at business and other things you do in your life. And so the second and third and fourth year that I raced, I became very competitive. The best I did was second place out of these 100+ cars in this entire circuit.
And you were the only only female in the racetrack during that time?
There weren't many. The female racers would kind of come and go, but for like that period of time, I was pretty consistently there and competitive. Kind of talking about the things I learned with racing that are kind of relevant to startups is Duke. He told me, like, if you can get the audience on your side, then the officials at the racetrack will be more favorable to you, because you have to understand the economics of how these racetracks work. The racetrack doesn't make money from the racers that pay their $100 or $200 or whatever it costs to enter the race. They make their money on the audience that's sitting in the grandstand drinking beer and eating nacho chips. And if you are an attraction and you go spend time with the audience and the audience follows you from racetrack to racetrack every weekend, the promoters and the owners of the track will love you for that, and they will give you favorable flagging. They flag and they make decisions about who gets kicked off the track or not, and they'll be more favorable to you. And so I spent a lot of time just working with the audience. And after my second or third year, I started winning enough races that I was getting these little plastic trophies each time. And I had gotten so many that I didn't really care about them anymore. So I would go into the audience, and the first kid that I would see in the audience, I would just give my trophy to.
Wow.
So immediately I started to gather this huge following of people that were fans. First the kids, then the parents of the kids. And these people would follow me from track to track. They would scream and cheer whenever something went right for me. They would boo and hiss when something didn't quite go right for me. So that was, just one lesson, like promotion, right? Be generally a good person, and kind of promote what you're doing and be accessible and get fans and, have that back and forth is helpful. And that's kind of, followed me through my whole career. And I try to just do that.
Interesting. So it's like you learn a lot of your personal brand building and customer engagement right up quite young during your racing days.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, there's a lot of psychology behind it. And, there's mentors along the way have kind of given me these little tips. And, as a professional now in Silicon Valley working in startups, I look for CEOs that I admire um, and try to learn from them. For instance, one of our investors in my new startup is Logitech, and the CEO of Logitech, his name is Bracken Darrell. He is the absolute nicest person. He will always take time to talk to you. He's very supportive of other co-founders, and he gives a lot of advice on how to motivate your team internally, how to be humble when you speak to folks outside the company. And it's I'm always looking for folks like that to kind of guide me.
That's good to know about that. So from race cars, you moved to personal computers, and I would say that 1995 you were too early into that business, or even before the big guns started aiming the computer market, you were there to set up the business.
That was a perfect time for me to get into building computers. And so the story behind that's kind of interesting. A friend of mine from high school, I was visiting him, and we were hanging out in his, what he called his man cave, where he had converted his garage into his gaming center. He had his computer and couch and stuff, and he was showing me this 486 PC computer that he had built. And he was telling me, he's like, this computer normally would cost $1,500, but I convinced a parts wholesaler to sell me parts at a wholesale price, and it only cost $600, or it was something like that. And I'm like, always having an entrepreneurial kind of sense, I'm like, wow, you can make $600, $700 building a computer and selling it to someone. So I'm like, let's start a computer store and let's build these things. I was like, I have a way to get money to start us. And so, a little side story, I was pretty rough around the edges at that time. I was still kind of almost an angsty teenager, you're young and dumb. Anyway, so start this computer store with my friend. I sold off all my racing gear, and we do this, and immediately, not being a mature adult, me and my co-founder start butting heads all the time. And eventually this business splits up, and I end up losing all of my money, in the deal. So, I had two choices at this point. I went to my friends, what should I do? And they're like, you should go back to school, get your high school diploma, you should get a college degree, and then go find a good paying job somewhere. But instead I got kind of mad. I can't let him do this to me. So I just took the last pennies that I had, and I rented this little tiny store. It used to be a barber shop.
Wow,
And
okay.
a one-chair barber shop. And I unbolted the barber chair, and I pushed it into the alley in the back. And then I went to his dumpster and got all the boxes, the empty boxes, and I put them on the walls so it looked like I had product. And I started selling computers. I barely had enough money. Someone would come in and say well, I want that video card and that sound card and whatever. They'd give me the configuration they want. And I'd have to scrape just enough money to build that one computer. And I actually ended up living in the back of that computer store.
Wow.
It was really, really difficult to get going, but I was slowly getting the flywheel going. Again, another mentor stepped in and helped me. And kind of going back to this idea that I was like rough around the edges. I was just a teenager, dressing like a teenager, talking like a teenager, swearing all the time. Across the street was the owner of a insurance sales. He was an insurance salesman. He had a business, and he would come over at lunchtime and he would bring me food and sit down and kind of talk to me on his lunch break. And he started teaching me these little tricks. He's like, started teaching me about relatability. He's like, I don't want to offend you, but you need to look professional to be selling really expensive computers to people. And if you're dressing like, a teenage kid and swearing a lot and not speaking very professional, people aren't going to trust you. And so you might try to adjust, how you look and how you talk. And again, remember, I'm a kid that hung out at the racetrack. So,
Yeah.
you would swear every other word. But I admired him. He was very successful in the town, and I started to adopt some of these things. I started to learn how to kind of dress the part as a salesperson, and lo and behold, sales started going up. My business started to become more successful. I started hiring employees. Then I started opening more stores, and eventually I had 5 computer stores all through Oregon. And because we were so early, it was 1995, Windows 95 had just come out, and quite a few people were just getting onto the internet, and it was a really difficult thing to do. And so our business strategy was, we were the computer store, and the company was called Computers Made Easy. We would make, very literal in our name, we're going to make it easy for you. And it was super successful. We would walk people through using a computer, and if they needed help in their home, we would drive to their home and we'd set the computer up. And again, thanks to these mentors that helped me along the way, it was a very successful business, clear until about 2000, 2001. And that's when the big players came in, and the market for little tiny boutique computer stores just evaporated overnight. Actually, those stores, what was really kind of heartwarming about them was we were all young. Like, even the kids that I hired to work with me, we were probably the oldest person in the company was 35. And we were very much like family. And we would hang out a lot. Like, even though we had multiple stores, like in miles apart, we would get together, we would go bowling, or, play games together. We would get together in one of the stores and we'd have a group gaming session. And as the computer stores started to decline in 2000, it was really sad. We had to start laying people off. And this is maybe a lesson that I learned about being like very transparent and honest to my personnel that I'm working with. We had to make some tough decisions. Who stays, who goes, who has more options, who thinks that they, have some skills that can really turn this around. And we tried and tried in lots of different ways to turn the computer store businesses around. At one point, we actually turned one of the stores into a network gaming center where college kids could come in and like play games for a few dollars an hour. And we tried that. And we tried selling satellite dishes and cell phones, and we just did everything. But this kind of sense of family was like really special. And even as the ship was sinking, we were all fighting to like, throw the water out and keep it afloat. And I wouldn't trade those moments for anything. And in fact, an interesting story. So as the computer stores were failing, I ended up shutting some of them down completely. And then I gave away the stores to some of the managers and employees. Like, if you want to try to run it, go ahead, you can have the store. If you somehow turn the business around where you can make some money, just pay me back later in the future. Many of them just folded in a very short amount of time, but one of them, as of like maybe a year or 2 ago, is still in business in Canby, Oregon. Computers Made Easy, still running.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm super proud of them for keeping it going. sorry, again, a long story, but it's like there's all
That's
these
a
little things that you learn.
yes. That's an amazing story in terms of. I'm sure that you would have learned quite a bit from uh, the experience of running a computer store, that to converting a barber shop, staying right behind the shop, and in a very limited budget, surviving yourself and making sure that the business is also up and running, uh, and that too when you are maybe in your early 20s or in your late teens. So which is an amazing experience to get, which definitely has helped you in the long run when you started getting into the real game of entrepreneurship and getting into the corporate league.
Yeah, there's so many things I learned about the computer stores that um, it taught me super valuable lessons. Like you have to try to, you know, stretch everything as much as possible. You have to try to be as like honest as possible. It always is better to be honest and upfront. There's a story that was kind of a bittersweet situation that happened at the computer stores. So kind of taught me about being honest. So in the very early days, I didn't have money to pay all the bills. So I had to find ways to skimp as much as possible. And so one of the things I was doing is I couldn't pay for garbage service. So I would take all the garbage from my computer store and then I would go, down the block and I'd find garbage cans and I'd throw it in the garbage cans to save $20 a month. And it was a very embarrassing and humbling moment one day when I was working with a customer and a police officer came in and right in front of this customer said like, well, we know that you're throwing your business trash into your neighbor's garbage
Oh,
cans. You must stop doing that. And it's like it's kind of an interesting lesson. There's time to kind of bend the rules, and then there's bending the rules too far. And in a startup, it's like, how far can you bend them? But you got to be like compassionate and a good person. It wasn't fair that I was throwing garbage, and I deserved every single bit of that embarrassment of having the police come and embarrass me in front of a customer. So
wow.
I try not to make those mistakes.
Yeah, it's if as a when you look back and when you consider the age and your surroundings during that time, definitely you're born to make a lot of I would not say mistakes, a lot of learning hurdles that you have during those time, and good that you faced and you went through all those hurdles, and you realize that these are the things that you need to change to become a better person. As a
Hmm.
person itself, you how you can become a better person, and which in the long run can help in building successful companies. I'm sure that you would not have thought of becoming a startup founder at that point in time, because startups were not the game
No.
those days, which definitely would have been like how to become a better person. And this has definitely helped you in the long run, so which is good to hear. And it's
You know,
hard
it's
to get this.
funny. What's funny is, when I think back to when I was 25 or so, and I'm successful in my computer stores, and I had more money than I knew what I could do with at that point in being a 20-year-old. It's like, wow, I'm so successful. I'm like perfect. And it like at the time, like my attitude was like, I've arrived. I like know everything now. And throughout my career, time and time again, when I think that I've like become like a better person and arrived, something happens to me that resets all of that. And I have to rethink, you know, what are my failings and how can I be a better person? Like right now, I'm talking to you and I'm talking with this authority, like I've arrived, but who knows, 2 weeks from now, I may have another humbling moment, very much like that police officer coming in and telling me I can't throw the trash. And let's hope no police involved, but there's going to be, I'm going to be 100 years old and I'm going to be another humbling moment, and just helps me realize I haven't arrived yet. you never arrive.